Welcome to Open Octos. Congratulations. So my name is Shannon. I'll be your chair. I'll let the panels introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, Manda here. All the best.
Hi, congrats for making it to Octo Final. My name is Cynthia, representing Brawijaya University here.
So just to confirm, OG is Universitas Presiden, first speaker Halim, second Kathleen. OO is from Unpar, first is Jennifer, second is Mustafa. CG is Lambung Mangkurat, first is Ridwan, second is Rifki, yeah. And then CO is Binus, Jennifer, and Rachel. Okay, few reminders before you start, equity rules apply. Kindly do a mic check before you start, and also bear in mind kalau kalian tipe debater jalan maju mundur, hati-hati volumenya. This is a live stream room, maintain decorum. Also for audiences, several reminders. If you want to go to the toilet, if you want to take a call, first off, kindly check your devices to make sure they're on silent or even airplane mode as to prevent any disturbances. If you want to make a phone call or anything, please do it in between speeches, tidak di tengah-tengah speech. Even when you're not making a sound, it might still be visually distracting towards the debaters. One more thing, kalian ada yang perlu toilet dulu kah sebelum kita mulai? Oke. Sama untuk penonton, please be mindful we do have a consent based policy when it comes to taking pictures and videos. So yeah, this is a live stream room, so I think if you want to screen cap or anything, you can always do it through the YouTube link later on. Welcome to Octo Final Rounds. Now I call upon Prime Minister to start the debate. Hear, hear.
Also, can I have my own timer, please? Oh, I cannot. Oh yeah.
For everyone.
Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think we need to agree that the traditional practices in the very first place has already been passed from generation to generation, right? Means that they have already received trials and errors, right? And what this look like, right? Traditional practices means that, you can see that your grandma or grandpa, for example, like you are seeing them doing kerokan, for example, and you are being influenced that, you believe that Quran may relieve your pain, right? For example, like you are masuk angin, for example. And this is why we think that a formal field is needed for this kind of traditional practices, because we want this to be a formal field for a scientific study. In the status quo itself, there is no real study for this, right? So means that there is no scientific reasoning behind the Quran. It's just a folklore that, oh, if you are masuk angin, you will Quran and you will feel better, right? So we think that what is the formal field look like in the scientific study? We think that the university or hospital fellowship that they can receive a degree in their specific field, right? So by the end, this can give a credibility. Why we think that this credibility is important for this traditional practice, right? Because in the very first place, people would there are diverse mindset in the society, right? For example, like if you are having a broken ankle, people might seek for a chiropractor because they believe that, oh, the chiropractor can relieve their pain for their ankle, right? Because there is a disconnect between the modern medicine versus the traditional medicine, right? And what this can lead to, for example, like if there are malpractices because this is not a proper field of study, that it can it is not burdening the people itself, but also the credibility of a certain of traditional approach, right? And that is why we think that this is important for make this something a formal study. But inherently, the traditional medicine itself, it is inherently have lived alongside with human, right? Because back then, before the technology, we live alongside with nature. What is look like? Like for example, like back then, you don't know that, oh, if you boil pandan leaf, for example, that it can give a fragrant aroma, right? There is no technology that can prove you back then, but they are doing this by trial and error, right? So nowadays, that all of the scientific research is only based on the technology. Means that they are the academia now neglecting the traditional ones, right? Because they think that, oh, the traditional is already irrelevant. But we think that the goal of the medicine itself is to help people, right? To feel more comfortable, and that is why we think that this is okay and this is fine for these traditional medicines to have their own field. So because what we want to push is that whether this is true or not, right, means that there are already people believe it, and we want to have the formal fit to prove it whether it is wrong or not. Because people right now that see that they will always seek for a formal medicine in the very first place, right? So what comes to your mind if you are having a headache? What would you go is that, oh, I need to consume Procol, for example, because this have a scientific result that, oh, it can it can soothe for my headache, right? Because we agree that this traditional medicine is not for all. This is for only who need and who want, right? Then that is why we want to cater for these people that wants this want to approach for these traditional medicines, to give them the credibility, right? Why this is important later, because acknowledge that some natural remedies are effective. We do not have to always consume Procol if you are having a headache, for example. Like there are another approaches, for example, like you are having an acupuncture, for example, because the result is the same, right? We want the person to feel to relieve themselves, right? And that is why we think that there is no really a factor that preventing us to do this, because why we think that this is bad. Consuming always this chemical dosage receipt from medicine, this can lead to we want that not to be a primary need, because by the end that consuming this too much can be bad for your body, right? For example, like the dosage that is given by the doctor means that this is hard for your body to handle, for example, and that is why we think that approaching with traditional medicines means that this is something that, oh, it is natural, and there is always this tagline, right, that traditional is better because it is inherently a nature, right? And that is why we want to make this a credible. But before that, POI.
Do you think the recognition will encourage people to opt more into traditional medicine?
And that is why later I'll explain to you the likelihood for people to actually shift into this traditional medicine, right? Why we think that the alternative is better? Because these dosage medicines, they are chemical. We still okay with chemical usage, right? But we do not want to encourage people to always seeking for a chemical, because first, chemical itself means they are being produced, means they are being commercial, right? What happens is that people would need to buy it at a several cost, right? But what we see in the natural traditional medicines means that they are natural, means that this is something that easy to obtain, that they need to have the knowledge how to produce it themselves, right? So this is why we want to make that this is the first alternative for them. This is that in the long run that we want to shift the society that they will seek for the natural approach first, right? But we are okay with people who wants to consume for this chemical directly. We are okay with that because for example, like we cannot pursue we cannot give someone that they are cancer only needs to have natural medicine first, right? We agree that there are several steps that they need to acquire, for example, like the chemo, but there are already traditional approach, right? For example, like drinking a chicken broth for enhancing your stamina, and that is why we think that these natural traditional medicines, they can also give you alternative to not always seek for the chemical medicines, right? And lastly, the likelihood of this is not for all people. Yes, we agree. But what we want is that for our scope of people to have much better alternative, to have much better approach that by the end if people always discussing it, means that this is not only for the field of research, but by the end there is an implementation. Now we create a study, give it credibility, and for the people to seek safely, and because there are a base of study, right? Because by the end that the credibility itself is inherent, right? And proper purpose.
I thank Prime Minister for that fine speech. Now to begin the case for Op Bench, I call upon Leader of Op. Here.
All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We already took everything away from the locals. We took batik, we never told them, for example, oh there is batik Semanggi, there is batik Megamendung. We always say it's batik from Indonesia. We never give acknowledgement toward the minority, never give acknowledgement toward the locals community. That is, we actually champion and reserve the house. If government concerns is malpractice and unknowledgeability toward this kind of products, we think in status quo, the practice is not that bad. You know, for example, we know there are like spa, pijat, for example, and it's still okay at the end of the day. But we think people also have options in market, because on their side of the house, we never really say that, oh, it will eradicate all of the conventional products, saying like paracetamol, etc., right? But we think most of this kind of medicine, the effect is kind of like pseudo, right? We say this is pseudo, this is not instant heal, just like in conventional medicine, and that's exactly the differentiations. Because what their champion, the local community champion under this kind of products, is exactly the value of communality, the value of paguyuban, for example. Why on their pijat, for example, they can, you know, tell their stories, for example, for I don't know, probably like the other generations, or for their cucu, for example, and that's exactly what we champion. I think I already told you why everything that locals have right now is already been taken away, right? And this exactly why the sense of value coming from the locals, saying like paguyuban, or probably like the proud, the significance of their existence have been like taken away. At the end of the day, what this narrative creates is people becoming more product centric. It looks like we priority the cheap price, for example. It looks like we prioritize the cute design, for example, but never really actually respect their, for example, effort on making obat Cina for 5 jam, for example, right? It looks like how at the end of the day, the moment it becoming like recognized, i.e. commodified, i.e. capitalized, it looks like how the capital at the end of the day will compete to make it, for example, cheaper, for example, good quality, right? Premium, etc. It will discredit the value of community. It looks like how the commodifications will make this product ununique anymore, because exactly the replications is very, very huge under the side of the house, right? But it also create like interventions toward the culture, right? Because exactly there will be like modifications that doesn't represent anything from the culture. For example, you see at the end of the day how, for example, in Aceh we understand, for example, there is like medicine using like marijuana. But for example, because Indonesia we illegalize those kind of things, the kebun, for example, being like burned by the government, that is exactly the interventions happen. We discredit them, making them adjust to us, but never really recognize what and who they actually are. So what we want in the service house is simple, right? Let the status quo be like this, right? Let them, for example, have the absolute ownership toward the products, toward the culture. We say at the end of the day, even if there is like, for example, marginal monetary effect, for example, we think it's okay, because at least in our side of the house, there is value, there is credit, they feel significance and proud for who they are. Let me tell you two things. Why identity is something that is not regardless under discussion, and secondly, why commodifications becoming discreditations toward this community. Let me tell you why identity not something that is regardless. We took away everything for them, which makes them experiencing crisis of identity. How it looks like? It looks like there will be like accusations toward the ownership. Like it looks like, for example, they cannot tell the children that, oh, your grandmother used to make this medicine to heal me at the end of the day. This kind of story, which makes the next generations proud, for example, will less likely happen on the side of the house, right? Because they can see another 1 juta obat being produced in pasaran, for example. How is the impact? It looks like children will be like less knowledgeable, for example, proud about their culture, but it also looks like what the manifestations, for example, many of us know like Jeruk Andaliman, right? But we think because Batak community is very proud about this, they only preserve this in their garden, for example, in the village, and that's why the exclusivity making them prouder and prouder and making it more significance in the market. The price is so high, and it directly, transaction with the local community, which give them like more margin profit. But second of all, let's talk about the lucrativeness, right? I think the moment this is being capitalized, I questions how lucrative it is when there is like instant heal, for example, like paracetamol, etc. Right? In status quo, at least in our side of the house, there are hobbyists that really pay attention toward culture, for example, therefore willing to pay more, willing to pay the effort of 10 jam tumbuk obat, for example, but under the side of the house, there will be like competitions. The companies will say, hey, lower down your price because we need to sell as much as possible, right? Identity that we preserve makes how the value of our products can gain profit margin, even it means we have like niche market, at least it also gives us the credit that we deserve. But why commodifications leads to discreditations? Let me tell you, the moment you commodify this, we think it means like you valuing everything from the monetary aspect. It looks like, for example, people will never think about, oh, this is produced after like 5 hours of process, for example. People will not think about that. There are like 1 million products, and people will choose the cheapest one, for example, right? Even if OG say, for example, oh, at least it makes the process becoming easier. We think something that this community expecting is not the easiness, because what they want is the credit. What they want is reminiscing the moment their grandmother making the medicine, and people feeling the same thing, the empathy toward this community, for example, which manifests on the value that we already told you about. But second of all, why commodifications will not be fair under the side of the house, right? We think at the end of the day, who will claim this the most? It is the capitalist, right? It is country, for example, or probably like corruptive government, or probably like corruptive companies, for example. It looks like how, for example, Minyak Bali, for example, we always claim, oh, it's from Indonesia, right? At the end of the day. So at the end of the day, the credit doesn't come directly to the suku of Bali that creating this kind of minyak for at the very first place. But second of all, we also think that at the end of the day, the benefit only coming to the company, for example, how at the end of the day, the margin is very, very, small coming to the community at the end of the day, right? But we think at the end of the day, it also makes them losing opportunity to find a niche market that at the end of the day really interested to pay for those kind of products, for example, right? So at the end of the day, how it looks like is exactly right. They lose all of the monetary benefit, they also lose the value or maybe like intangible benefit coming from it. But even if it makes the supply is much more easier under the market, we think the effect is not significant, right? Because the options of like modern medicine is so huge, people can go to medical school, and even if you make this, you make this a subject in medical school, how many students want to learn to numbuk obat, for example, right? So the moment it becomes like unlucrative, for example, that is something that they have to define. How is the likelihood look like? So suddenly it becoming something huge, for example, or intergenerational. We already prove you all of those, right? It looks like, for example, at the end of the day, how the market and the companies will only use their name for greenwashing, for example, to exploit their name under the name of Bali, but giving like so much, for example, benefit toward like the community, right? I already told you why at the end of the day, the monopolizations, then the oppressions happen under the structural system will never give them benefit.
I thank Leader of OP for that fine speech. Now to extend the case of OG, I call upon Deputy Prime Minister. Hear, hear.
Am I audible? Give me a few seconds. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, some responses first. For example, when opening government says that there's such thing like, for example, like pseudo benefits or things like this, I don't think this is something that is valid because even in modern medicine, placebo is also used. For example, you give like quote unquote sleeping pills to patients who have insomnia, but those are not actually sleeping pills. Those are probably just some vitamins, but you give them, and this is actually something that is very well researched, like placebo, right? So pseudo effects actually exist in both sides of the house, and this also can be very beneficial because it's also used in modern medicine and has scientific research on how this can be very can be possible. When they say that commodification, we think commodification already exists. If you go to the nearest Indomart, I'm pretty sure you'll see antangin, you will see koyo, you will see like pain relief patches. So commodification already exists, but what happens in their side of the house is this is unregulated, not scientifically backed. What happens in our side of the house is you can actually reap more benefits. Maybe in the past you see that, oh, this like there's a certain ingredient here that that is maybe not as effective. Maybe instead of using frankincense essential oil, you will use, for example, like tea tree oil instead, something like that. That's exactly what we want. When they and that's why, for example, my first speakers already mentioned to you about the example, like for example, I think a lot of people, what happens like with a lot of women when they have menstrual cramps, they will only take like instant reliefs, such as like paracetamol, painkillers like that, and they take it every month. I think in the long run, this is only something that's going to harm your organs. Instead, what can happen is maybe they didn't know that they could like maybe drink chamomile tea, eating prunes, things like this, right? And therefore, what happens outside of the house is because it's recognized as something that's like formal study. What happens is there's going to be much more knowledge. There's going to be much more of this knowledge going around, much more things that are actually scientifically backed. We think that culture is very important, yes, and that's why we want to protect this culture because precisely because in fact a lot of people like students or apprentices of this like traditional medicine can get very confused on where or who to find as their own mentor because again there's no regulation on this. The thing is so what happens when they say like to students there's going to be less students, I think it's not really the point of the debate here, but what happens in our side of the house is there's actually clear directions of where you go, where to study, how to study, what type of credibility or credentials that you will have, right? Because I think this is very important. Like human health is something very important, right? You give the wrong like dosage, you give the wrong something to someone, like even the littlest mistakes like that can be very, very fatal. Therefore, we think that because this is both healthcare, this is both something that has to do with the common goal of like helping humans live better lives or having better health. This is something should be regulated, right? Because the thing is, even with cultures, years, it is always shifting. The acupuncture that is used today is very, very different with the one used thousands of years before, because my first speaker has precisely mentioned to you about trial and error, right? People always understand, oh, maybe this point in the nerve is not something that can be poked, and therefore they don't use that anymore. Or maybe they use like different needles because the needles in the past were not as like effective anymore. These are shifts and evolution that always exist in culture, and we want to make sure that this culture is protected and therefore is much more sustainable, because people don't leave these cultural practices because they feel like, oh, I only do something and then it harms me, because in a sense that they think that they for example, like precisely those mistakes, right? They think that because there's no like regulatory like no science on this backing, and therefore, for example, maybe it's like a benefit that some people market as benefit, but it's not actually something that actually disadvantages you. People will start to leave this, right? But what happens outside the house is people, scientists, researchers, and even with the local people that have already understood this knowledge, we can work together to understand a common goal and to fix those mistakes, right? Because this is exactly what's important. We have not involved the local people and people who have studied this field that has already been derived of thousands of years, and that is exactly what is lacking, and that is the disconnect that we would like to integrate in our side of the house. We think what happens in our side of the house is there is going to be a integrated solution, as I mentioned before. This is going to look like in tandem with the modern medicine that you've already consumed. So what happens? Obviously, we're not saying that everyone should take traditional medicine, right? Because my first speaker has mentioned to you, for example, some people that have cancer, like that's not possible to only be solved with like drinking teas and everything like that. But we think that what happens here is we can integrate the solution. So what happens is, yeah, you can get chemotherapy, but on the other hand, you also have acupuncture. You still go to your chiropractor, so you have better stamina in order for your physical health to be better, and therefore combat cancer cells better. Yeah.
If people are already using traditional medicine, why you need it to be formally recognized by institutions and science?
Precisely because this is not regulated with scientific, right? Like the thing is, for example, chiropractors, a lot of them uses the doctor degree, but actually no, like there's no chiropractic. It's not formal medicine. And I think you've seen like several videos where some people would literally just crack someone's neck very hard. And like imagine if this is like something that happens and is this very dangerous? And there's so many like cases of like tendons being injured, your bones being cracked the wrong way, right? Because I think this is something very vulnerable. You like crack the wrong way, you crack the wrong angle or direction, someone's life is literally going to be lost because it's a very vulnerable area in the neck, right? And so what happens in our side of the house is people actually have credentials, people have credibility, and people understand they have to earn this credibility in order to operate on human beings. Because I think like even in modern medicine, there's going to be years before residents can even like touch a patient or something, because it's precisely that vulnerable. It's precisely very, very like important for you to really understand everything first. So imagine like in their side of the house where this is not something that is scientifically backed. You just crack people like here and there based on like some maybe research methods that are not as credible in our side of the house. And therefore, this is what we want, right? Because the thing is, I don't think opposition can say opposition can say like people like that, because at the end, what happens in our side of the house, there will be better regulation. Regulation is very, very important because I tell you on how vulnerable the human body is, right? And I think lots of people in more vulnerable areas, in more rural ones, traditional medicine practices are more accessible for them because very often there is very little modern medicine healthcare facilities. So this is the only alternative that they have and have grown accustomed to, which may lead them to denying modern medicine because they don't believe in them, right? And therefore, when we recognize this, at least there will be better understanding. We tell you on how we bridge the disconnect, and therefore, achieve this benefit. We think that, for example, what happens in our side is there's protection. There's going to be easier access, in fact, for a lot of these people, because I think you can understand about the endangerment of how globalization, modernization leads to a lot of cultures being eroded. What happens in our side of the house is we give them clear access. You can study this here. You can study this here. You can take fellowships here. You can like take degrees over here. And what happens in our side is systemic research. Exactly why systemic research is very important, because you have to understand very comprehensively what is going to happen when you do this, what happens when you do that. Therefore, dosage, things like that is very, very meticulously calculated, and things like that, right? So, and that's why credibility, reputation, access to knowledge, access to credible knowledge is something that's very important, because we don't think at the end of the day it's sustainable to only do this trial and error without like systemic research that is systemic scientific research. And therefore, why we think that scientific and cultural thing is something that can work in tandem together and create better healthcare for everyone and for patients, right? And therefore, our impact reaches a higher scope of audience. Thank you.
I thank Deputy Prime Minister for that fine speech. Now to extend the case of OO, I call upon DLO. Here.
Hello? Am I audible? Okay. Okay. Can I have a timer? Several responses towards the opening government, right? First of all, they told you that malpractice is only exclusive on our side of the house and will likely happen worse on our side of the house. I think this is at best symmetrical, right? Because medicine is a lucrative field, and people have already a lot of incentive to get into it, like by faking degrees, by faking the credibility, for example. So why won't these swindlers adapt the moment that you make this like an official thing, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a lucrative field. People have incentive to get this money. If people are really have that much like prejudice and hate and intent to do this like malpractice in the first place, right? So I think it is at best symmetrical. Two, regarding credibility. Credibility is in essence like is actually a bad thing, right? Because I like to flip this by saying because it creates more competition, which means that you make it exclusive to these practitioners, right? The moment these practitioners and will likely make the price expensive, right? Because they told you themselves that these practitioners will have to go to medical school and so they have to make it back. They have to make all the investment that they spend on medical school back. This is bad, especially in countries that have debt has like college debt, right? For example, because that could take a lifetime. This is bad in the countries like, for example, that do not have a good healthcare system. You will inevitably privatize this, and you will harm those that enjoy the benefit most of this like traditional medicine most, right? Which is like the grassroots people, which is like the minority people that is heavily reliant on this cultural belief, right? Essentially, you make it an exclusive thing. So thirdly, they told you that communication currently happens already because of like Koyo, for example, and things like that, right? But the degree of commodification is different, right? On your side of the house, you include practitioners. You include those that actually have like knowledge, generational wealth, generational knowledge, and all of that, right? More into that later. And yeah. Fourthly, they told you that practitioner will be better on the side of the house because essentially they will have like clearer directions on the side of the house. But I think this is like really not like, this is only best case, right? Because like the reason that the traditional knowledge has survived this far is because of the nature of the knowledge itself. It is generational knowledge, right? Which means that people are exposed from the very beginning. It looks like in the form of family businesses, right? Which means that there's an incentive for them to learn and be credible as possible. And it's also deeply rooted in culture, which means that it is very easy to call out when things are in malpractice or not according to the culture, right? People pay attention to culture and be more critical of culture because essentially it is part of an identity, and the moment the identity is being misused, they will call it out immediately, right? The moment that it is in the form of like lying and all that, right? Okay, now fifthly, they told you that integration happens in the side of the house is the best, right? They told you that placebo effects is already done in the form of sleeping pills. But at best, this will only to cater to their standard, right? Which means that the standard of like the medical board, for example, which means that a lot of like other alternative medicine will be excluded from this, right? Which means that practices like, for example, acupuncture, for example, maybe not acupuncture, maybe like kerokan, for example, that has a lot of therapeutic effect, but has zero to none like practical effect, right? Which means that they do not consider this at all, right? Okay. Lastly, they told you that people will disregard like disregard like modern medicine, right? But I don't think that there exists a world where people just simply disregard modern medicine, right? Because first of all, like people are smart enough nowadays, they have the burden to explain why people just simply will be able to ignore this. Because no matter how deeply rooted you are in your culture, you still have like common sense in order to like, for example, to go to get medicine, right? Because you essentially want to be healthy, and the only way you can be healthy, you can do that. At best, the traditional medicine will go along with the modern medicine, right? Which means that their biggest harm will not happen on the side of the house. They're only playing in the best case scenario in which they still fail because they've never proven to you the likelihood of this is happening, right? Okay, now let's move on to my extension and cases, right? I like to do several things first. I like to do that, right? First, this is probably like the greatest harm to this and the greatest impact to this is that it discredited practices that has placebo effect and therapeutic. This is still exclusive on our side of the house because there's a lot of other things that will not be considered by the doctors and the modern doctors, right? Because modern doctors that live in big cities is most likely be like a super anti-cultural, like, which means that they discredit this practice, they see this practice as being ridiculous. And also like when you take into account to America, for example, in countries like the US, they all disregard like Indian medicine because they're imperialists, right? The doctors and the people like that, right? Which means that this essentially is like catering to only to specific culture, that is the dominant culture, right? Which means that a minority at the end of the day will not be able to like do this, and at least it will be harder on the side of the house because of commodification and practitioners, right? You make it selective, you make it only you make the benefit only cater to certain people, right? But look, notice that the belief is the basis of this traditional cultures, right? The moment that you shake people's beliefs, is because at the best case scenario is that they shake people's beliefs, is really bad, because at the end of the day, you will take away all the benefit, right? You will like make them second guess themselves about the culture, you attack their identity essentially, and you give them no protection in which to do this, right? And yeah, the moment that the research started being published, is more likely to be selective and all of that, right? Okay. Notice that people rely on this as coping mechanism, right? The moment that the moment that they like any other alternative, for example, in the worst case scenario, they're a cancer patient, for example, they still need this traditional medicine in order to keep on hoping, right? When you take away the people's hopes, when you discredit them by saying that, hey, this is not scientific, it's the moment that exactly these people will not have any other choice. The moment that these people will feel like there's no way for me to get out of this situation, and it's really bad because you take away people's intent to live and to take away people's intent to like go on and such, right? So yeah, based on all the things that I've told you about, like ours is best case scenario, because we take into consideration that essentially when you take people's cultures away, when you attack people's culture, you essentially like doom these people, especially, right? Because notice that underside the house, they have never clearly explained to you why the likelihood of things will happen the way that they do, right? Because yeah. Sure, before I wait, any from closing first?
Exactly. If you said that, today's coping mechanism, we are not erasing traditional medicine. Exactly. If it is formally educated, it will be more accessible in those hospitals. Thank you.
But what if the degree of like placebo effect only applies to a certain group of people? What if what if let's say the only people that believe in Koyo, for example, is Japanese people, which means that in other like cultures, the only benefit is to those certain people, right? The moment when you standardize it, it's most likely to erase like the traditional practitioners, right? You make it a very exclusive, so the harm still exists. Your PI does not prove anything, right? So yeah, essentially you just segregate people's cultures, and yeah, the moment you make it official, it's much easier for them to credit. It's much easier to say that this practice is stupid. It's much easier to say to people in big cities to discriminate against these cultures and say that it is not based on scientific truth, right? Because yeah, based on all those things that we essentially want on side opposition is that we want to carry this people's specific culture. Why is this the most important metric, right? Because we notice that these people have no alternative, which means that they're the most vulnerable group of people, as I've told you before. This essentially means that you doom these people and leave them no way out. If you champion these people, you should vote on our side at house. Very, very proud to oppose. Thank you.
I thank Deputy Leader of OP for that fine speech, and that concludes the opening half of the debate. To begin closing half, I call upon Member of Government. Hear, hear.
Test. Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. How exactly recognition or that being supported it will looks like in our side? We think that it will looks like about how that there will be dedicated scientific study about how that it looks like specific study about acupuncture pattern, about how like specific study about mix of jamu. This kind of thing is what we supported, about how that we get more information, we get more standardized about these kind of things. The identity of CG is that we want to protect vulnerable actors from being marginalized, about how that we think when you actually not formalize this kind of field, more people will be marginalized and more people will be segmented. We don't want this to happen. We proudly propose this motion. Opposition never give enough check and balance about how that preserving this will be sustained in their side. About how that they only rely that these people formalize will capitalize this kind of thing, etc. But they never really explain to you how that in their side this kind of thing actually sustain. About how that they agree that we actually shifting to like more modern scientific study. Exactly that we want to actually formalize this kind of things. About how that we think that this kind of step is actually necessary to actually sustain this traditional medication field. Before that, before to my argument, several responses. They argue that this kind of formalized will make like product centric, about how there will be commodification, capitalization, about how they believe that it will lose its traditional value or will be discredited. Understand that when you make it a formal study means that you will seek for more information and more formalize it. About how that exactly like modern medicine study also seek for more information and actually like formalize it in a form of writing, for example. Exactly that this modern medicine still like using Latin language, still like credit Greek for the information. Exactly that theory still use the name of the people that contribute to it. Exactly that this will looks like in traditional medicine. Exactly that formalized will maintain the identity that they scared of to be lost of. Because to certain extent, we still like credit the product that is being created by this formal study of field. Exactly like Minyak Bali still include Bali because it is part of their selling point. Exactly that they will still like credit the kabupaten, the founder. You see this in a lot of local product. Exactly that we think that the capitalization that they really scared of will not be as bad because identity will still maintain to a certain extent because it is part of the selling points if they want to argue about capitalization.
Point of information?
No, thank you. Now, several arguments. Why we think that traditional medicine will still like need to be formalized. We think that within the status quo right now, there is still like a lot of local people that actually still practice this, right? About how that all locals that still like very traditional or like lack of access to modern medicine will still practice this kind of things, right? This is the vulnerable actors that we want to protect. About how that in a world where like they start to shifting to modern medicine, like they will be marginalized. About how that people will start losing interest and questioning the legitimacy of traditional medicine due to how expand the knowledge about modern medicine, about how that the exposure of it, about how that the traditional medicine does not have like formal study of it, about how that people will questioning this kind of thing. Exactly that these people will start to be marginalized, that people still practice kind of thing. About how that too, people will start losing interest because they think that modern medicine is still better. We do not want like we standard shifting to like more modern medicine. Exactly that the passed down information that exists within the traditional medicine will stop in their side. About how the losing traditional value that they really scared of will actually happen in their side. But also too that traditional medicine will have no regulation or standardized because now people are start losing interest. It becomes something that really traditional, something that being selling point. That is exactly why malpractice will exist in their side. We think that this is the urgency that we want to protect. Exactly that this is about practice, right? Exactly when it formalized, people can actually learn about it, people actually can practice about it in a term that people actually have standard about it. In urgency of preserving, we think that we win in this. Because we actually prove to these people that, traditional medicine actually have the legitimacy to actually be pursued, to actually be used. Exactly that. Preserving will be more likely to happen because interest will be keep maintained. But also too, in urgency of protecting these vulnerable actors to continue doing this practice will still be prioritized because now people actually see that these people have the background to actually do it. About how that these vulnerable actors that still maintain this kind of practice still can do it in our side of the house. That's why we win in the vulnerable actors. But then too, how that it will still be accessible, right? They argue that if this become a formalized study, it will become expensive, like it will increase in the price. We think that it will not be that crazy. About how that we think that let's analyze what makes the modern medicine become expensive, right? We think that what makes modern expensive is like one advancement of technology, about how that you need all of this crazy technology to make one medicine, about two that you need the logistic of all these ingredients that is not within the nature of that kind of regions, but also three about how that modern medicine provide you a lot of ton of varieties. We think that this kind of thing is what makes modern medicine is inaccessible and expensive. But then what makes traditional accessible, right? We think that exactly like within the context slide that they relied on nature, on natural environment around them, exactly that jamu ingredient might have twists to their own regions, but still like to have the same benefit. It is their way to identify toxic ingredient. It is exactly why that it is being passed down with the legitimacy of safety, about how that these people actually tried this kind of thing in the past, therefore that it being proved to be safety. OG minus the outcome of this. Here's how we analyze this outcome of this accessibility. We think that one, with much more accessible, people will actually can reach more people, especially people that within sub area that has a lack of access and infrastructure. About how that this can become an alternative for these people that doesn't have like all this big hospital, all this big apothec, for example. We think that this kind of thing, when it being formalized, it will be much more easier to spread to these people because it is much more accessible for them. But also too, that it encourages people to actually be healthy, because it is not something that really that crazy expensive, like you need to buy a pill to make your skin tighter. About how that there is an alternative, like you can go to like use this medical traditional medicine, you can go to this traditional practice. We think that this kind of alternative will actually push people and encourage people to actually like be more healthy and be much more easier, because it is now being formalized. People are not scared of it. Therefore, people will more likely to actually go to the traditional medicine compared to like the alternative that they provide, like modern medicine, you need this kind of pill, and you're scared of this kind of chemistry, etc. Therefore, we think that when we're talking about protecting vulnerable actors, we win in this debate, and therefore we are proud to propose. Thank you.
I thank member of government for the fine speech. To begin case for CO, I call upon member of opposition. Hear, hear.
Hello, is this loud enough? Okay. Trigger warning, I may be talking about death and some stuff, so yes. My grandpa was treated to his heart disease when it's far too late, that he lived the rest of his life not being able to walk, not being able to live the rest of his life to the fullest, because he believes that it was just a trivial chest pain that old people get. This can be cured only by his tukang pijit, for example, with his weekly krokan and massages. If only my mom weren't a doctor, he would not even opt into surgery to prolong his life at all. I think OO takes this whole debate for granted, right? Because they only say about the vulnerable people and about how it oppresses people. But I think we need to cater to these vulnerable people who doesn't believe in modern medicine, but how it can change their life, but how in this traditional medicine in itself is not a guaranteed effect that these people could get, right? Firstly, that they say about prioritizing the cheap design, vulnerable to the traditional medicine makers and culture. We do not think that this is relevant to this debate at all, right? Because traditional medicine would have their own segmentation. But what is different on CO is that we know that medicine is detrimental to people's livelihood. This is why it's even more dangerous for opposition on government when you let people believe so much in traditional medicine, right? I think judges, you need to keep this in mind, right? This is what is going to happen in the world of government, right? The world that government works at is in a world where traditional medicine is valued as big as modern medicine, right? In itself. They say that, oh, you want credibility and legitimacy, right? The credibility in itself is very harmful, right? Traditional medicine is historically developed. So now we have research, modern medicine. Now this is completely obsolete. We already have modern medicine that is more guaranteed for you to actually get the results that you want, to actually treat your heart disease, for example, to actually treat diabetes and those stuff, for example. Legitimacy of traditional medicine is the thing that OG champions the most, right? But this case is exactly their downfall, because legitimacy creates internalization that people can trust it. People are validated to not do modern medicine anymore, even when they have a stomach ache. On your side, they would just think that it is just a stomach ache that is very trivial, but it is because of a ruptured intestine, for example. Because exactly on your side, these dangerous illnesses that can't be cured by traditional medicine can only be cured when it's already too late. CG talks about accessibility and making people healthier, but I am already going to call up those benefits as well. But firstly, why does this debate exist at the very first place, right? This comes from the skepticism of conservative people in conservative area that does not believe in modern medicine. Older generations that are afraid to go to the hospital and see doctors, either because they believe that drinking jamu is better, or it is just unnecessary. Secondly, traditional medicine are more accessible because it comes from natural resources. It is easier to obtain. It is less painful. This is the internalization that traditional medicine is cheaper and can even be more effective and can already give the same benefits of modern of modern medicine is already there, right? Those things are more exacerbated by the fact that traditional medicine is already formalized, right? People are more validated to the fact that traditional medicine is more valid, that they're even more validated to opt out of life-saving surgeries and other modern medicines, right? Even if they opt into it, they will try all of the traditional medicine first, and it will be too late when they get those surgeries at the end of the day. What does this recognition in itself mean? Firstly, more research that is going to be done at traditional medicine, right? Right now, people use traditional medicine for relieving minor pain, right? Jamu like Kiranti for periods, for example, because their period cramps just isn't super bad. Wait, but when it is so painful that you can't get up, this means on their side they will just drink more jamu and get kerokan and get acupuncture and then get cupping, for example, because it's not as scary as going to the doctor, or even more, or it is even cheaper than getting an MRI, for example. This is very harmful because people cannot internalize the urgency anymore to go to an actual PhD doctor, right? Then does this also tackle CG's arguments about accessibility, right? If you say that people are going to develop traditional medicine, which means the state are going to be pressured to do more research on those traditional medicine, right? Which means the advancement of modern medicine wouldn't even exist. So the accessibility of modern medicine would even be more exacerbated on your side, right? They are pressured to allocate resources to develop traditional medicine more than modern medicine, to develop more better jamu, for example, or like better chiropractic practices, for example. And then secondly, on our side, status quo focus on modern medicine, which eventually gives the incentive for the state to actually develop something about it. Things like BPJS and Kartu Indonesia Sehat exist because there's an urgency from people that it is something that we need. We need modern medicine, and we want modern medicine at the very first place. But on their side, because it is formally known that traditional medicine can be as good as modern medicine, there's no urgency for the state, there's no urgency from the people to actually push these individuals at the very first place. Yes, opening.
Your case is only because there is no research to prove whether it is true or not, right? What you need to prove is that this modern medicine is enough to cater all.
Okay, I'm going to extend that on this one. First, how the recognition as a formal scientific field means there's more research, right? Okay, more research. First, no scientific proof that traditional medicine are guaranteed even after centuries of development, right? There is no concrete proof of whether a kerokan can actually help you or rupture another person's blood vessel, right? Firstly, diseases are so diverse. Traditional medicine prioritizes treating symptoms. This is the reason why this is not in line with the holistic approach of medicine at the very first place. To go to chiropractors for pain relief and not actually treating the real issue. People's pain will go back after a few weeks, and they need to go back again and again to chiropractor because exactly they are only treating the symptoms. Inherently, traditional medicine only treats symptoms, not an actual person as a whole. Secondly, on placebo, right? This is only going to be better than what OOF said. One person can drink jamu and be healthier, but another person who drink it can get extreme pain in their stomach because they do not know that they have ulcer. Secondly, or people can get relief from masuk angin with kerokan, but another person that have weak blood vessels can essentially die because of it, right? And thirdly, on the behavioral pattern of the people, traditional medicine is less painful and less scary, right? This is why people will opt into more acupuncture and drink hot water with honey lemon, for example, instead of getting life-saving surgeries that could actually be very dangerous if not done so in the early stage. Secondly, first thing to do is essentially to go to this traditional medicine anyway, right? Because inherently people can do it and it's easy and it's already accessible, right? So, but on our side, we are not pushing the narrative that traditional medicine is going to be as good, but if you want to opt into traditional medicine, then you know it's only to treat minor pain, for example. Especially because it is rooted in cultural values, people will continue to do so, and people who get benefits from it will preach it to other people. So traditional medicine will still exist anyway. This is better than what OOL said, that like, oh, people still would do it, but like there's no process analysis to it, and we give it to you. Why is this very bad for the principle of medicine in itself, right? What I have said. This doesn't treat people holistically and not the symptoms in itself. This does not align with traditional medicine in itself, right? And then secondly, you cannot bet on people's lives. Traditional medicine are not guaranteed in itself. So if you try to treat another person who have also with jamu, but you don't actually have an MRI beforehand, then that would be very dangerous for that person at the end of the day. Pratu, oppose.
I thank member of OP for that fine speech. To close the case for government bench, I call upon government whip. Hear, hear.
Check. We're not erasing traditional medicine. We never said that. We're not erasing modern medicine. We never said that. We never said that also. The thing is that we are trying to do is that when we put a field of research into these traditional medicines, the thing that we are trying to protect in CG, and the only one, by the way, is trying to protect this vulnerable actor by the framing that Hafiz mentioned, that this traditional value and traditional medicine have been marginalized by modern society. This is why we don't understand why CEO said that, traditional medicine should not be trusted because you shouldn't rely on this, and this is why we shouldn't research on it. We don't understand why they bring this up, because if their only urgency was to care for people, to actually care for modern medicine, which means they don't care for the cultural beliefs, they don't care about traditional values that inside of these traditional medicines, right? But this is why this is what we don't want in CG. We want these people to actually still have these benefits, and we want this benefit and this history to actually be historized and to be codified in our side, which is within those research. This is what we want in CG. This is why in CG we will push for this certain urgency of these people being recognized in modern society. I'm going to do clash to all teams and why CG will win this round at the end of the day. Let's clash with OO first, right? OO bring mainly about two things. First, they're afraid that this field of research will discredit their culture because of capitalization excess, and they will lose their identity of that certain practice. And second, they said that, we don't want to research this because some people use this as a coping mechanism, and if it is standardized, they will lose the placebo effect of this. First, let's attack on their discrediting the culture, right? First, this is a very worst case. This case lays by an assumption that this scientific study on medicine only on research for the sake of money and lucrative businesses. Exactly, you can still mention those batik names that you mentioned because there's a history within those research, right? There's still been codified of research in those history. This is why it still exists in our side. Scientific study of medicine doesn't mean just for money, which means the scientific of research, which means history will still be there at the end of the day. At the end of the day. And at best, history will be preserved in our side because of the scientific research. Because on our side, why those history values still be there? Because of book and research on those history values. Exactly, this is better because Hafiz already framed how traditional medicine practices have been marginalized in modern society and question the beliefs of it. This is why in your side, if there is not this and you only value the word of mouth, we will afraid that it will lose its value at the end of the day because in your side, people will be more inclined to modern medicine, and this is why it is better not to maintain the history value of it. Second thing, even at worst, capitalized and lucrative business exists in our side. I think Hafiz already rebutted this by saying the identity will still be there because at the end of the day, in the box, in the packaging, at the very least, their identity will still be there because of this is medicine from this. This becomes the selling point. If they concerned, this is the selling point, which means you discredit their value, understand, Hafiz also already mentioned that this won't discredit because to research in the very first place, to institutionalize this in the very first place, Hafiz mentioned that it needs someone from the culture in itself, which means someone from the culture will be involved in this research and to be to modern medicine. This is why discredit won't happen on our side. And at the very least, how can it be a lucrative business competing with modern medicine? Again, there's a segmentation. Exactly, people with traditional can still buy this from modern medicine, and people can still opt into this. This is why lucrative businesses will still be there. Two-waying. This is why we call out how their framing is non-charitable because this is very worst case. And second, even that we still engage to them with their worst case. Second thing, about coping mechanism, how they set out it will lose the placebo effect if it is standardized. Exactly, we want this coping mechanism to widely accessible in those hospitals that you said. More accessible in modern hospital. Exactly your case, even cancer patients that need this coping mechanism, you said that this is why when those cancer patients in a vulnerable state, we want this traditional medicine to be widely accessible in those modern hospitals, provided by the hospital. This is why accessibility exists. What about the placebo effect? They don't even elaborate why placebo effect will lose if this standardized happen. The thing is that we still give the same traditional medicine that they want, right? If they want jamu, we still give jamu. If they want acupuncture, we still give acupuncture. This is why the placebo effect will still be there. This is why all of their cases have been tackled by CG.
Traditional values will still exist anyway, but when it comes to people's lives, do you think that culture and opening more clinics is more important?
Look, even if you argue that certain traditional medicine doesn't have any benefit whatsoever because of your case lies on, oh, there's already historical research on it, we don't want to buy this. Why? Even if kerokan exists, even if jamu exists, those are natural natural medicine for you, like natural thing that actually preserve you to be better, right? Even if it still has small benefit, it has still benefit at the end of the day. And again, we don't deny modern medicine at the end of the day. They never explain why modern medicine will not exist in our side. Cool, let's go to CEO now. CEO talks about two things. First, they said that, oh, please trust modern medicine and that traditional medicine is dangerous. Two, research on modern medicine will be less because people will be more focused on like traditional medicine. First thing, they said that, oh, please trust modern medicine because traditional medicine is very dangerous and people shouldn't rely on this. First thing that is very wrong is that they don't care about traditional values and cultural belief because they still, oh, just opt in into tradition, opt in into modern medicine and all of that. This is not fine. We don't want this to happen to marginalized people. Second thing, at worst, what is inside of the traditional medicine such as kerokan, jamu, acupuncture, and all of that is still have very like it's still at the very least has still some benefit to you, even if it is not as big of benefit as you thought in your side. Because at the very end of the day, it still have benefit to you, right? As bettering your blood flow and all of that. At very least, this is what we want. This is what we want to preserve. And if they said that, oh, this is not like a very good thing to rely on, exactly, this is why we still have modern medicine on our side. This is why research on that will still happen. This is a tag or their second case also. If they said that, oh, research in modern medicine will be less, this is not a this house prefer motion. Both things can still coexist. Research on modern medicine and research on traditional medicine can still coexist. This is why you value research, because the thing is, if you say that, oh, there's still history of research, and the thing is, there's still no benefit, that's why we still want to research more. Even if there's still like historical research, the thing is, you're not researching enough. This is why we want. Now, let's see why we want against OG. First of all, the thing is, the prerequisite of their impact is still on our side, because they have never mechanized what is recognition, what is research you want in our side. That's why they're just throwing a lot of impact. Research and regulation never mechanized in our side. That's why in our side, we mechanize this, and that's why those impact will still be better on our side, because the outcome is in our side in CAG. Second thing, that our urgency about accessibility and marginalized people actually answered the CEO and O concern, right? Whether like, oh, will this traditional value still happen? This is why our urgency is better rather than just regulation and research in OG side. That's why CG win. Thanks.
I thank government whip for the fine speech to close Ops case and also the whole debate. I call upon opposition whip. Hear, hear.
I think the first response you have when you get a flu in Indonesia is always to drink hot water or to drink jamu first, right? So this debate is not on why traditional medicine is good or bad, but why do you want it to be formally recognized by formal institutions, for example, right? Because the inclusion of traditional medicine legitimizes the practice for people to always opt into it due to how cheap or how accessible, like what OG and CG has already told you in the first place. But let's talk about OG first, right? OG claims to you the long history of traditional medicine is enough to prove effectivity, therefore they want the formal recognition. Few responses to this. I think first of all, if people trust in traditional medicine, they will always opt into kerokan or they will always drink jamu anyway, so I don't see the urgency for you to actually formally recognize traditional medicine for all of these medical institutions, right? Because traditional medicine has always been deeply rooted with the culture and the traditional background that all of these people have in the first place. If people get a minor flu, for example, you will always drink jamu, you will always do cupping, for example, instead of directly going to hospitals and whatnot to take antibiotics or to take Panadol and so on, right? Because if the benefit of like formalizing these traditional medicine is to have knowledge and regulation, I think first of all, people will still learn about traditional medicine. That's the reason why it's passed from generation to generation. So I don't see why knowledge is a big problem inside status quo, right? But secondly then, I think regulation itself is not exclusive to just recognition. Why? Because of two main things. Firstly, because formal approval or permission is still needed from the government, for example, for you to open up clinics, for example, or for you to actually do practices that is involving the people's health and involving the people's livelihood as well. That is the reason why if these clinic people or like the doctors are doing malpractices, you can get incarcerated, right? That is the reason why regulation has already existed in status quo. But secondly then, patients still have the agency to actually call out these doctors for malpractices, for example, and I think insofar as these doctors do not want to lose their clinic, for instance, they do have to abide with the regulations and so on. But oftentimes, traditional medicine is not dependent and society still consents to it. That is a problem that you have with formally recognizing traditional medicine, exactly because it legitimizes the the practices, it legitimizes the people's perception towards what traditional medicine is capable of doing. But secondly then, that proves why this debate should talk about severe cases of sickness. There's a high fever, for example, allergies, or even cancers in like extreme extenses, right? We directly assume that the credibility or the traditional treatment is that good, even if both OG and CG never prove to you why is it that good and what is the likelihood to better development as well. Why is this bad then? Because I think the more recognition you have with traditional medicine, the more people will trust and opt into that practices. I don't think GovBench could be that half stance by saying that, oh, people will still use modern medicine anyway, because there's already that underlying perception to why traditional medicine is always going to be better, exactly because it's more accessible and so on, and because of the deeply rooted cultural belief that people have towards traditional medicine. Because firstly, I think even after centuries, there was never any proof that traditional medicine will actually cure every types of diseases. That's the reason why traditional medicine still cause different types of complications for different types of patients. Chiropractors are still harming people, for example, right? If you drink jamu, maybe some people do not have the capacity to actually accept all of the traditional medicine that is based on these natural medicine as well. Why is this likely then? Because A, I think diseases are extremely diverse. Cupping or acupuncture is never going to be enough to actually fix every type of diseases. But secondly then, traditional medicine works under the basis of placebo effect, meaning that the benefit of treatment is extremely contingent on how common your sickness is or how much you trust in traditional medicine. This directly links back to our first point on how the sicknesses are very diverse. Therefore, you cannot just generalize that traditional medicine is able to actually cure you at the end of the day. This is immoral then, because there's always going to be a bet on whether or not my doctor can actually heal me, which directly clashes with the entire code of conduct for scientific medicine for you to be formally recognized, to secure health and to promise the certainty of treatment for people to actually get better and feel better as well. But thirdly then, the recognition in and of itself triggers a behavioral shift that provokes an underlying perception that traditional medicine is better than modern medicine. CG is very half-stance here because they tell you that they want accessibility, but they then tell you that, oh, modern medicine will still be there and people will still access it. Two things, right? First of all, if that's their case, then we question their entire benefit of accessibility. If no one is going to use it, then why formally recognize it, right? But secondly then, what is the urgency to recognize traditional medicine? Because I think my member has gave you enough reason as to why people will still use traditional medicine as like the first step to curing your disease before directly going to the doctor to get surgery and so on. So what is the weighing then? I think on the principle of scientific medicine, it is very, very crucial because it directly intertwines with the people's livelihood. Insofar as culture-based medicines cannot provide any safe holistic treatment, it can still exist but not formally recognized by all of these medical institutions as well. But moving on to our case, right? I think we're going to talk about how the formal recognition of traditional medicine is inherently bad, because I think OG's argument talks about better and more regulated practice, even if it's not perfect and credible, it's still going to be bad, like what CO proves to you. Because firstly, I think there's always going to be a comparison between traditional and modern medicine, exactly because people prioritize short-term economical stability. So if these medicines are so cheap and accessible like what they say, then people will start comparing MRI with chiropractic. They will compare chemotherapy to drinking jamu, right? And blindly attached with traditional medicine, exactly because there is credibility, like what they tell you under years of the house. There is scientific background, exactly because people will trust into it. You create a more defensive behavior from society that chooses the traditional medicine. But secondly then, also directly clashing with CG, right? Because they tell you that this recognition affirms people from developing countries or even conservative area to only use traditional medicine. Why is this likely? Because A, I think credibility will always blind your perception to effectivity. So if your perception is already that conservative, that recognition fuels into that and it incentivizes people to take kerokan and fix all of their illnesses that unfortunately has already caused a lot of the people's life, exactly because it is not compatible with these people, or how it is not always going to be the case that works for these patients as well, right? But secondly then, I think this further,
Explain to me why traditional and modern can both be used in tandem at best. Explain to me why traditional and modern medicine can both be used in tandem at best.
I think exactly because firstly, people are still deeply rooted into cultural things, which is why there is still options towards traditional medicine, but we think that there isn't an urgency for you to formally recognize it. But secondly then, I think we're talking about it further creates the resistance to change. That's the reason why many boomers or older generations refuse to go to hospitals. Shiji talks about the preserving cultural norms that people have, but I don't care whatever the culture that you want to preserve, insofar as my family or my friends, for example, are still dying because you keep on taking traditional medicine. I think effectivity is way more important. Comparison to CO then. I think we directly way over OO because it's not about about commodifying culture, it's about the people's life that we're talking about. First, we talk about accessibility. My member has already countered that. We talk about how the government still provide BPJS, JKN, and so on. Secondly, with more research on modern medicine, I think the effectivity is able to be more improved in the arts of the house. Therefore, we prove why modern medicine is going to be way better in the arts of the house as well, right? So what's the weighing then? We're able to prove to you several layers of analysis for why there is blind attachment on their side, which is why it's bad, but people's livelihood is then preserved under CO's world, and that's the most important. CO is the only team to actually cater towards patients.
Thank you, Opweb, for that fine speech and that concludes the debate. I encourage the debaters to cross floor, shake hands, and then go back to the venue. Thank you as well, audience, for maintaining decorum.